Recently, I was sent Kendra Norton's newest reverse coloring book, and it got me to thinking, is reverse coloring really worth your time? I mean, it's basically doodling on messy watercolor, right? What could reverse coloring possibly have to teach me and you? I mean, it doesn't sound very serious, so I'm gonna stop myself right there. Because if you've been on this channel for more than a hot minute, you know how I feel about reverse coloring. But this isn't going to be just a traditional review video. I want to break it down a little bit and look at the ways that reverse coloring actually can make us better artists. Kendra Norton is a mom of 4. She's a multimedia artist, she's a creator, a nurturer. Yes, I did read this off the internet. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest, gorgeous, and still lives there, lucky her, with plenty of fresh air and mud puddles. One of her many dreams is to volunteer in an elephant sanctuary. Okay, friends, can someone help a girl out with that one? Because that's pretty darn cool. So Kendra's the gal that brought us the official idea of reverse coloring. And I'm going to link below because I've covered it a few times on this channel. All right, it's time for a little refresher. Reverse coloring basically works like this. You start with a messy wash of watercolor. You can basically do whatever you want all over the page, a bunch of different colors. You can do more abstract, a little bit more realistic, but the idea is once that's all dry, you're going to come back in with some type of dry media or something that makes a mark or a line. So a marker, a pen, a pencil, even a liner brush, you do you. And you create art on top of the dried watercolor wash. And you try to pull something more recognizable out of that art by the marks you make with your pen or pencil. That was a lot of words. I hope it made sense. Now back to Kendra's books. The basic structure of the book is simple. It's a soft cover. The paper is heavier, a little bit heavier than a text weight like printer paper, has a little bit of a sheen to it, and it works well with all types of mediums. I'm even going to go into this with a little bit of watercolor marker and water, so you'll be surprised how well this paper reacts. Let's get into it and choose our page. I've decided to use a mechanical pencil, a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, a Sharpie, a felt tip pen, marker, whatever you want to call it, and watercolor brush markers. And I love this second page in the spring section. It's super muted, it's obviously flowers, and so it gives me a great opportunity to kind of let these flowers kind of pop off the page based on whatever I do with my pencil and my pens and all the things. Now you have some choices here with reverse coloring. You can try to make the finished piece more realistic. I know this is flowers, but do I want to try to sketch on top in a way that makes it more defined? Or do I want to stay loosey-goosey and go with the flow? I'm going to go a little bit with the first. I'm going to try to tighten this composition up a little bit. It's just how I'm feeling today. Now I am following the basic shape of the watercolor washes that were laid down. I'm thinking these look a lot like a trumpet flower. They could also be very easily tulips. So I'm creating that kind of long trumpet neck-like shape with a few petals kind of sprouting on top of that neck, and it's looking pretty good. And of course the leaves, you can go in and make those leaves curve and twist and curl. The leaves I find to be very relaxing because they're extremely hard to mess up. All right, let's get the conversation started. I want you to head into comments. Let me know, have you tried reverse coloring? And did you like it or not so much, and why? And while you're at it, give this video a boop, friends. That's a like. It lets everybody know to head on over and get in on the reverse coloring fun. I found with reverse coloring to not get so focused, to not linger on every decision that you make. You'll notice with my Sharpie right now, I'm kind of bouncing around, hovering above the top of the paper. And you can almost see the decision making that's happening in my hand. I'll stop, I'll pause, I'll go to a completely different section. I'm just letting my mind and my hand connect in a very fluid way. And I'm not letting my brain Yes, I feel like there's a difference between your mind and your brain. I'm not letting my bossy brain get in the way and overthink all of these little sketchy decisions that I have to make. Now, something you could do here, when you first look at your page and you say, that kind of looks like I could turn that into a trumpet flower. You might want to go ahead and Google trumpet flowers and look at the different types of flowers that have that trumpet-like shape. I mean, there are so many, morning glories even. And you could look up things that will give you some spatial size, and Google Images will be a great reference point if you feel like you need a little bit more structure as you work through the page. Now that we're getting into it, and you're probably working from some type of photo reference, here's 3 tips that I think are really important when you're going through a reverse coloring experience. Number 1, start with the center of a flower if possible. It gives you a lot of structure and direction for the overall shape of that flower. Number 2, consider the size of the cluster of flowers. There's a lot of that going on in here. So for example, if the wash or brush strokes get smaller in a flower cluster, then your sketchy marks should also get smaller. And number 3, I'm going to ask you to consider kicking realism to the curb this time around. In my humble opinion, it's just not what reverse coloring is all about, and you're going to have a really steep hill to climb if you try to turn this one into a photorealistic masterpiece. You'll start to notice that I am filling in some smaller areas fully with the black Sharpie just to create some drama and depth. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but it can be so important, especially for an exercise like this, that really begs you to be loose and free-spirited, to stretch out your hands. So if you're feeling tight and stiff right now, I would beg you to give your hands and your fingers a little stretch. You'll immediately see the difference in the marks that you're making. And remember, keep that whole arm moving and loose at this stage. Now, you might be wondering, Christy, when's all the other stuff coming, all the other supplies? Really soon. Here's the thing. You have such an advantage with reverse coloring because the underlayer, the base layer, is done for you. So if all else fails, if you start overthinking, if you're feeling stiff, if you feel like you just can't make the flowers look real, just sketch around the shapes of the watercolor washes. Outline them, sketch around them, and just see what happens. All right, next phase, I'm going in with the soft brush-like nib of the Pitt pen and adding some black to the centers of some of these flowers. And this is really starting to help things pop and give some depth. And this is just a simple tap and lift, tap and lift. And this pen is wonderful. I'll link it below. It acts a lot like a number 4-ish round watercolor brush, but you have the ultimate control of it being in a pen format. I absolutely love it. Definitely give yourself permission to go ahead and go off-road with some of your marks. What do I mean? See there how I'm adding some cascading black berry-like swags? Well, those aren't in the underpainting, and I don't think Kendra would be upset one bit that I'm embellishing on her beautiful artwork. And so it's adding a lot of life. I'm just filling in. It's giving a nice high contrast vibe to an otherwise lower contrast look. And so definitely go off-road, friends. It's tons of fun. Now, I have a feeling that many of you have done something like this, but without it being in a book. So head to comments and let me know how you've done a version of reverse coloring, but without the book. I can't wait to hear your ideas. And friends, if you'd be so kind, a boop, that's a like on this video, would help my channel so much. Bringing in the watercolor markers, and I'm just adding a little bit of this like toned down green to certain areas of the leaves, like half of the leaf. I'm thinking about a tulip leaf, if you want to Google one, and I just want to give a little bit more structure. So I'm laying down a stroke on that leaf, and then I'm taking a damp brush, use whatever you have, and blending it out. And look at that, gorgeous. And friends, remember this paper is a couple steps above a really good quality text weight printer paper, but it is handling the water beautifully. Now, obviously, it's a damp brush. These aren't puddles. You get the picture, but go mixed media on this. It's all good. You knew it was coming. You knew I needed to get a punch of brightness in here. And so I have this like bright cherry red watercolor marker that I'm bringing in to some of these open tulip looking flowers. And I'm just blending them out softly. Again, this brush is barely wet. It's extremely damp and it's giving me that blend perfectly that I want. Feel free to use your watercolor markers just like you would a liner brush, with adding detail and thinner lines and linear detail to some of the flowers. I like to start from the underneath the belly of the flower in a lot of ways and kind of stroke upwards to create that linear detail following the contour of the shape. And here's that felt tip pen, and I'm just literally going in and creating some scratchy colored in sections in these purple areas, and it's just for texture and interest. It's not messy because I'm staying within the lines in my coloring, but I am able to kind of have the freedom of creating really scratchy, loose mark. Because I stay in the lines, it doesn't feel messy. Although I think probably some of you are watching this being like, girl, this whole thing is messy, and that's okay. Now it's time for the pencil. I'm using a mechanical pencil. I have all of the supplies linked below, friends. And I'm just adding, again, you guessed it, linear detail into these leaves. Now these are taking a turn from a traditional tulip leaf, but I felt like it. Just adding some striations or veins, if you will, coming out from the center line. And I'm going off-road again, friends. I love going off-road. Adding some rogue leaves here and letting them cascade and play into the other leaves that are part of the original underpainting. And I love these little bubble marks that Kendra included on this page, and I want to elaborate on them a little bit. There was just a few suggestions of them at the bottom, but I'm going to add a bunch more in, and a few suggestions of a stronger stem in areas. And yes, I'm going to go in and do some smudgy smudge because I feel like it and I think it works. So just scratch on some marks and take your hand, your finger, whatever, the palm of your hand, and scrub back and forth a little bit to get that nice smudge effect. Continuing on with my pencil for a little bit, just as it feels right, going back into those purple flowers and recreating that sketchy, scratchy coloring in effect like I did before with the felt pen. You just do you at this point, friends. Again, be instinctive, be mindful, bounce around the page, don't overthink one area too much, and you will really reap the freedom feeling rewards of this experience. I felt like I needed a little more brightness, so I brought in a slightly fluorescent green watercolor marker, and I'm just dabbing it into areas. This part of your experience should feel the most free, the most loose, the most relaxing, because you've established pretty much all the basic structures of this piece. You're just going in and you're gilding, friends. You're just adding the gilding. It's just that little touch. It's the cherry on top, and you should just be relishing every little moment of this. So heck yes, reverse coloring is 100% worth your time. And Kendra Norton has done an incredible job with her books, and we are so grateful for her in this community. Friends, reverse coloring though does force you to calm down with the realism. It forces you to loosen up. It forces you to approach your art maybe in a very different way from what you're accustomed to. And I call that a good thing. And guess what? You can do this without a book. You can grab some scraps and some supplies and, well, just head on over and watch this, and I'll tell you all about it. Happy painting, friends.